Coming up on Starting Line.
By putting it in the Constitution, we want to free it to be able to give us the right kind of advice that could set up a much more fair sentencing system in our state.
Representative Carlos Mariani wants to amend the Minnesota Constitution to include the state's Sentencing Guidelines Commission. Find out why on this week's Starting Line.
In 1978, Minnesota created the nation's first Sentencing Guidelines Commission. Part of its mission is to develop and maintain rational and consistent sentencing standards. The commission is already state law, but Representative Carlos Mariani is proposing House File 2858 to make it part of the state's constitution.
2858 will put a question before the people of Minnesota on whether our Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission should be embedded into our Constitution. And I frankly think it's an important thing for us to do as a people, because that commission was created to be an objective, fair, uninfluenced by politics, electoral politics, decision maker that can set up a framework for our state to ensure that there's fairness and equity in our criminal sentencing and probation systems. And unfortunately, in recent years, there's been some reactions from legislators here in response to the commission, quite frankly, doing its work. And part of what it did in 2016 is it said, we're sentencing a lot of folks to prison unfairly for drug offenses that aren't necessarily violent drug offenses, and it's creating a mess in terms of just fairness, but also in terms of clogging up our prisons. Some of these people, quite frankly, really need help overcoming addiction as opposed to long prison sentences. There was broad agreement with that. Unfortunately, there are legislators here in powerful positions who took issue with that. Obviously, we could do that as a legislature, take issues with decisions that the Guidelines Commission does. However, that's different from saying, the Guidelines Commission can only do what we think is right. And so by putting it in the Constitution, we want to free it to be able to give us the right kind of advice that could set up a much more fair sentencing system in our state.
You're chair of the House Public Safety Committee. Why put this question to the voters rather than move it through the legislative process?
Well, we're probably going to try to move it through the legislative process as well. Quite frankly, for us, this first step is really about bringing attention to this issue. Unfortunately, a lot of Minnesotans still don't know about the commission, even though it was the first commission created across the nation. It's been nation leading. It's done terrific work over the years. But a lot of folks aren't aware of it. And so part of us putting a bill together is to get that public awareness and then have the big public conversation as well. Quite frankly, hopefully it'll help my colleagues here come a little bit more to their senses within the context of that public conversation.
Does your proposal change what the commission does now, or would it change what the commission does now, or how it operates currently?
No, absolutely not. Quite frankly, what it does is it reemphasizes and revalidates what we designed many, many years ago. And again, nation-leading work, to create a much more just and really, quite frankly, effective and non-wasteful criminal justice system in our state. But no, there's no change to the mandate and to the expectations of the commission.
Just a couple of weeks left here in the legislative session. Why introduce this now?
Well, part of the reason to introduce it now is that we became aware most recently that legislation has been put forward by some of my colleagues here to go in the opposite direction. Particularly over in the Senate, they've introduced a piece of legislation that, quite frankly, would politicize the commission. And so this is perfect timing for us to be able to lay out a much more fuller awareness for the public about this. And quite frankly, we are going into the last few weeks of negotiating here. We want to make sure that those negotiations are guided by the steady adherence to the principle that we established decades ago around this commission, which is let's not politicize the work of this body.
Representative Mariani's bill has been referred to the House Government Operations Committee. For more information on House File 2858 or any bill that's introduced in the legislature, visit the House website, www.house.mn. Thanks for watching The Starting Line.